Hey, it's John and Mike, brew.shoes.com, and it's, it's the wrap-up of the 2022 series of the Jar of Destiny. Woo! This is the second of two beers in the fourth installment of the series, and I chose the BJCP style 12C English IPA. And I'll talk a little bit about the recipe as Mike enjoys the beer. And we'll start right from the top. This is a recipe for 5 U.S. gallons. And I'm going to start talking about water first, because
as you should.
That's
it's usually the first thing in the pot.
Yeah, honestly, that is true. For this one, I actually used spring water. I went to the store real early in the morning, and I used spring water. And I just seasoned that with 4 grams of gypsum at the beginning of the boil, just to throw it in there. Grains, kept it simple. 12 pounds of crisp Maris Otter malt. That's 5.4 kilograms. That's 94% of the grain bill. And then 12 ounces of Maris 80 Love crystal malt. 340 grams, 6% of the bill. Really just wanted to get like English Pale Malt, and then, you know, instead of doing like 60 or doing like, half 40 and like 8, I just said, we'll just do 80. Hops. This is where I tried to really get it going. 1.5 ounces or 42 grams of Target hops. That's at 10.9% alpha acids for the full 60-minute boil. An ounce or 28 grams of East Kent Goldings. 5.6% alpha at the 20-minute mark to go in the boil, and then 2 ounces, 56 grams of East Kent Goldings hops, again 5.6% alpha for dry hopping for the last 3 days of fermentation. Yeast that I used, 2 packets of swollen 1090 British Ale yeast, mashed at 1052 Fahrenheit for 60 minutes, that's 67 degrees Celsius. Fermented for 2 weeks at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius. The original gravity on this sucker was 1064. Final gravity, we got down to 1014 for ABV of 6.56%.
Excellent, man.
Yep, someone's had a few sips.
Somebody's had a few sips.
So let's talk about it.
Look at that orange color. I love the color of this. It's only going to get better as it clears up a little bit. The initial aroma on this baby, there's a very subtle, like, light fruitiness, but there's a malty backbone. It's almost 50-50. I mean, you have to sort of focus on one or the other because they're both right there. But neither one of them is over the top strong. The flavor profile is a really interesting mix. I've had a few sips, and even now, there's still a lingering bitterness in there, but there's also a minerality that's there too. So that gypsum addition in the spring water is definitely probably playing really nicely with 1, that English yeast, and 2, these English hops. And I know, we don't talk about this a ton, and maybe it's my own perceptions, but I do think after years and years of these things being paired together, that everybody sort of drifted together into creating a certain profile just because they've been applied together all the time. So there's a really nice blend there. There's definitely a nice malty, biscuity note coming off here. And it's interesting that you just use Maris Otter and crystal malt and not, sometimes I have found that Maris Otter on its own can almost be a little bit too much. But it works here because it should be a little bolder, a little bit stronger. Certainly throwing in some sort of biscuit malt or something would really take this probably too far in that direction.
That's why I left that out, because I was reading through recipes as I was kind of gathering notes, and a lot of these called for English Pale Malt. They didn't name the actual brand or whatever, but then they asked like to throw in like maybe a ½ pound, of biscuit malt, and I was like, we've talked about this. You and I have talked about this. And I said, I think Maris Otter can take us to the finish line for that biscuit note. So that's
great. And then the yeast character, there's a really nice ester thing, which I think is driving the fruit on the nose and the fruit on the palate. But it's not like fruity. It's just there's a pleasant hop, sweet fruitness there that works. I think if you look at any modern day English IPA recipe, if there is a descriptor with it, you'll see it, the word used a lot is underappreciated. It's underappreciated, especially here in the States. It's an underappreciated style. They didn't even put it in the IPA category, for crying out loud.
Nope. Pale Commonwealth beer.
It is. This is an excellent example, I think. Actually, you know, I would, if I was going to tweak it and play with it, I would like to see what maybe splitting the caramel malt between a couple would do, just if there's a little bit more depth there. But this is still excellent on its own. That would be the only thing I would think to shift up. And then yeast 1098, I think that's the ESB Fuller strain, I think. Someone's going to correct me, but yeah, it works really well here. It's attenuated well, and at 6.5%, it's like smack dab in the middle of those BJCP numbers.
That's where I wanted it to be.
It's fantastic.
Actually, I was targeting for an original gravity of 1068, just to pump it up closer to 7. But then I don't know. Yeah.
You're flirting with American nuance there, right?
I just started the boil, and you know, I was gonna go to like 90 minutes, but like I think I started like playing around with my refractometer and got a sense of where I was, and so like at the 70-minute mark, I just shut off the flame and said, forget it, that's it. That's what we'll get. And then we were there at when I finally got my hydrometer, the sample at the appropriate temperature for the hydrometer. That's where I get the reading of the 1064. So that's why we have that. All right, well, I'm glad you like it. Jar of Destiny. You know, I was like, freaking English IPA. But it was fun to like come up with the recipe number one, looking at like different sources, trying to figure it out, like thinking to myself, like, okay, what do I just love the fuller, you know, ESB kind of. We're just doing like 95%, you know, pale malt, and then 5% crystal malt. That's the bill. Yeah,
the yeast in this strain of yeast particularly is really doing a lot of heavy lifting here, right? It's melding together those hops and those caramels, and it's giving an ester quality of the fermentation. It's also actually giving out a little bit of glycerol in its fermentation process there, which is helping with the body sort of smooth everything out. I think it's beautiful. It's That's why I think for a very long time in my brewing career, I was just brewing English ales of all sorts and experimenting with all those English ale yeast, because I just think that they're amazingly interesting. So, and in this application, this is the classic, one of the best ways to experience it.
I was hoping to get more spicy hop on the aroma, but you know, it's still in there in the flavor. It's like, it's still, you can still get like that EKG thing going on in the flavor, and like I think the target just adds to that lingering bitterness through the flavor. And I think it's all good. Yeah, I think
it's hard to get EKG to like really come out of the. It really is more of a flavor than it is to me. In all the years I've been using it, than like an aroma, punch in the nose aroma thing. I think a lot of modern, like in the UK, English UK IPA brewers actually finish a little bit with, you'll see recipes where they actually finish with a little bit of Cascade, just to give you that. I think, you know, this is still like super traditional English IPA of yore, which I love. But if you wanted to have some aroma to make people really think of it as an IPA, even some of those English brewers finish with a little bit of Cascade, or dry hop later with some Cascade. But not enough to be like American grapefruity, just enough to be like, oh, there's a little bit of a citrus note there.
Got it. All right, well, that is that. The only other thing I was going to say is that the reason why I did the water I did is that it came out so well for the Kolsch. So that I just said, forget it.
It is the way to go here for us. That's the way to go. All my beers, that's the way to go.
Don't know if I'm going to do it for all my beers. I certainly have more beers to discuss between now and the end of the year that I use tap water. But it's just, I mean, for me, it's like it's worth the extra money, the trip to the store, just to like treat it with a little gypsum. And then, you know, like again, that Kolsch came out tremendous. And I think after a few more weeks in the keg, this is going to like clear up. It's going to get crisper. It's going to be even better than what we're tasting right now. All the good elements will just get better, I think.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
All right, how do we wrap it up? This Jar of Destiny started around, you know, around this time last year. Maybe like you came up with a concept of,
right at the end
of it, like it was like mid-December. So, you know, I think that the feedback has been positive. I think we're going to continue it on.
Yeah.
2023
With some twists.
with
Yep.
with some twist. The jar, you know, is going to throw us a screwball or something. We'll see. So stay tuned. There's going to be more homebrew challenges on the way for the coming year. So I hope you enjoyed the English IPA presentation of the Jar of Destiny series. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, because we do this kind of thing every single week. Leave a comment below. What's your take on English IPA right now? Is it, as Mike put it, underappreciated? Probably. So let's talk about it. For John and Mike, brew-juice.com, brew on.
Cheers.